Space, the final frontier. Hey folks, it's Kent Lindstrom. My guest today, David Anderman. Maybe a way to think about this episode is that in technology, every so often, a new technology emerges, a new world opens up, and everything changes. Think about the internet. Before the internet, you might have dreamed of a social network, but you couldn't build one. But when the internet emerged, it opened up the world, and now there's social networks that connect billions of people. The same with, for example, mobile. Before mobile existed, you might be able to imagine Uber, but you couldn't build it. But then mobile came along and transportation changed forever. So today, there are two technologies that are like that, which means we're living in just an extraordinary time. One of them is AI. That's not the topic of this episode, but the other is space. And while you weren't looking, SpaceX and other companies like it made access to space cheap and possible, where previously it was basically expensive and impossible for anybody who wasn't a government. Today, people with a dream and an idea and $5 million from a venture capitalist can go try to build a space mining company, a hauling company, manufacturing company in space. A startup just landed a probe on the moon. I don't think anyone has a more interesting perspective on investing in space or space in general than my guest today, David Anderman. David Anderman worked for Lucasfilm, for George Lucas. That's right, Star Wars. Helped George Lucas sell that company to Disney. And then, he went to real space. He went to work for Elon Musk as his general counsel, where he oversaw things like the launch of Starlink. And then, you'll find out what he does next. He starts a venture capital company called Stellar Ventures, and we'll tell you what they do. But I really think you're going to like this episode. As Douglas Adams said in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, space is big, really big. Welcome back. It's the Something Fisher Podcast. All right, welcome back. This is the Something Fisher Podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. My guest today is David Anderman. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. David's an attorney. That's doesn't sound that interesting, but hang on. There's more. This is the week for cool careers on Something Ventured. He was at Lucasfilm as general counsel and chief operating officer. That wasn't enough. He went to SpaceX, where he was general counsel. And if that wasn't enough of a career, he's now a co-founder partner at Stellar Ventures, which is investing in space and related things. This is a heck of a career you're putting together here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I feel pretty fortunate. My sisters like to say that I manifested my 8-year-old self into a career.
That is pretty accurate. Now, did your 8-year-old self see Star Wars? Like when you came to Lucasfilm,
Oh yeah,
it was like you saw the thing, like your 8-year-old self saw the real Star Wars.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I famously watched Star Wars 17 times in the movie theater when I was 8 years old. And that was like the thing, that summer of 1977, that was the thing you did as an 8-year-old. I mean, every single weekend we went to the Nanuet Mall and we watched Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, so I saw it 17 times. Now, of course, I didn't tell George that when I interviewed for the job.
Right.
In fact, I didn't tell George that until we were on the plane. It was he and I on the plane going down to Disney from Northern California to sign the deal. And I told George, I saw Star Wars 17 times in the movie theater when I was 8 years old. And my favorite movie is Empire Strikes Back. And he was really touched. It was great. And as a gift, when I ultimately left Lucasfilm a few years after, when we were doing the integration with Disney, when I left, he gave me one of the original AT-ATs and Snowspeeder from Empire Strikes Back as a going away gift.
Oh, that's incredible. It's hard to describe to people who weren't kids in 1977 what that was like. There's a thing that I think, if I get this one wrong, there's a moment in the movie where the thing comes overhead. It's the I think it's like an Imperial cruiser.
A Star Destroyer.
Star Destroyer, right. It's Darth Vader's ship, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Comes from feels like behind you and comes over you and is so enormous. Like you just can't believe what you're seeing. It's so
And that's also the music from John Williams.
The music is
sits
It,
at that point, dun 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 dun
yeah.
dun,
Yeah, like
and it's the chasing the Tantive 4, because you got to know this, the Rebel blockade runner, and it's leaving, and then it
right.
rushes off in the distance, and suddenly the Star Destroyer comes behind you, this ominous presence. I mean, one
Yeah.
of the best.
It's just an incredible moment when you like. I know now people are like, oh yeah, that's like a Fortnite. I see that all the time. But back then, in that time, in that summer, when you saw that, it was just incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's an amazing feat of movie making. And one of the things I'm super proud of is right after we did the deal with Disney, John Knoll, who's a Oscar-winning, world-famous visual effects artist, but creative genius, and is now a senior role at Lucasfilm. He came to me afterward and he said, "Look, I've had this idea percolating in my head for a long time about, the story leading up to that scene, right? And that's
Yeah,
what became Rogue One." He said, "Do you think that Kathy Kennedy, who at that point became the president of Lucasfilm, do you think she'd be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." And do you think she'd be open to listening to this story idea? And I said, "Of course she would." And we, brought it over to Kathy, and then ultimately that's what became Star Wars Rogue One, which is one of my favorite of the new movies. And it's that whole story leading up to that moment,
yeah,
right? And, Darth Vader is chasing Princess Leia and trying to get the plans back to the Death Star,
yeah.
and it shows that moment. It's just, I mean,
It
it just shows how iconic that moment is, that you want to have a whole film just about the lead up to that moment.
Yeah, it's such an incredible world. You're a venture capitalist now. I had boy to bring this all together. Cyan Bannister on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and she has a great story. If you haven't heard this, I think you're a character in her story where she was making films as a kid with her buddy Lucas, and they bought the URL Lucasfilms. And for the next couple of years, she was receiving emails inadvertently from people who were trying to email Lucasfilm. And at some point, the lawyer at Lucasfilm sent her a cease and desist, and I think she said she settled for a jacket and a tour of the ranch or something like that.
We That would definitely have been me. I mean, I was known as when I was there, my screen name was Dark Lord of the Cease and Desist. So
Right.
yeah, we it was an interesting time to be there. We definitely, tried to get back a lot of domain names. I mean, I was there starting in early 98. I interviewed 97, started early 98, and it was really just like, the heyday of the growth of the internet.
Yeah,
And we were trying to deal with this whole thing of domain names, and how do we deal with that? And how do we go after them? And what kind of approach do we take? And I'll say, while we were there, you know, George in particular, but, of course, myself as well, trying to do it, had a real change of approach with how we were going to, go after these things. And I think we started off pretty strident, and then within a few years, very quickly, George realized that, look, the internet it's here to stay. It's never going to change. People are going to be taking, at first he kind of thought of people taking his art and changing it. That was something, a real problem. And I
yeah,
think like the Phantom Edit, famously, which was a film that people created, a videotape that was like distributed behind the scenes, where they edited out the scenes of Jake Lloyd from Phantom Menace.
right.
And he was really upset about that. But then he had a real change of heart and realized that, the fan community is one to embrace the internet and embrace what we just started to call expressions of fan enthusiasm.
Yeah,
So we stopped really going after, the people who are just creating fan sites, and people who are creating, knitting patterns of how to make, Yoda caps with Yoda ears for their babies, right?
right,
And
right.
started embracing it. And it was a huge flourishing of the online community for Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. We really, I think we really created, the beginnings of this fan community that's so famous now for Star Wars, that
Yeah.
thrives online, and people express themselves in so many different ways. And I'm so proud of like what we did and how we approached it, going forward from that point.
It's kind of incredible watching that happen in people make that move from like fighting it to not. It happened in like live concerts. There was a moment when the internet and mobile came, and the whole thing was like, put down your phone, like don't record this, that kind of thing. Like there's
Yeah.
even some things where they would take your phones at the door, and they had some system. And then people realized, maybe culminating in the Taylor Swift phenomenon. Wait a minute, like share what we're doing, share this moment with
Yeah.
500 people with like,
Well, think about the Grateful Dead, right? I mean, the Grateful Dead
yes,
famously had tape
yes,
sections for their whole, history, and
yep.
now that's every day, right? And they were way ahead of their time. It's, embracing expressions of fan enthusiasm. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's the phrase we would use at Lucasfilm, and I think it's even more applicable today.
the Grateful Dead. It's a great example of that. Well, I mean, to be a fan on this, what is it like working for George Lucas? I mean, he's just a larger than you have a thing with working for larger than life figures, but
Yeah,
he seems like a larger than life figure. His wife's, one of the most incredible investors in the
amazing.
world.
Yeah.
Like,
Melody's amazing. Yeah, George is really incredible. I mean, he's a true visionary. I mean, and a visionary not just on the filmmaking side, and he has an incredible, filmmaker's eye for detail and for creating imagery and envisioning what these things are going to look like. But not just that, he, he's a visionary on the technology as well. He's as much a technological visionary as he is a filmmaking visionary. And he would joke sometimes. I mean, he would say to me, look, Lucasfilm's 50% a film company, 50% a technology company, and 50% a toy company. So his math wasn't so good. But like but depending on the day, it was true. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to Lucasfilm. Look, I was not an entertainment lawyer. I was a technology lawyer in Silicon Valley. I
right.
was doing IP litigation for Apple and Intel and all these companies and exciting stuff right in the heart of the internet age in the internet day. And I went to Lucasfilm because it's as much George was way ahead of his time on
Yeah.
technology. One of the first things that I did for George when I came to Lucasfilm was they put me on this thing where we were going to make digital cinema. And we were negotiating deals with Texas Instruments and JVC to put in place the first digital projectors ever. This is 1999. And we were
Yeah.
doing it to try to do it so that when The Phantom Menace came out in May of 1999, that we'd be able to project the films digitally, because George's vision was that all Star Wars content, and certainly the film, was going to be distributed digitally
Yeah.
over the internet. And it was impossible at that point. You didn't even there were no digital cinemas. Right now, it's impossible to think of because there's not a single celluloid projector left in the world, pretty much.
Right.
And when George did it, Steven Spielberg came to him and said, George, you're nuts, right? You're getting rid of a film camera, you're getting rid of the film projector. It's like telling Michelangelo to get rid of the paintbrushes or the chisel,
Right.
right? It's just that's the art, that's the craft. And George like, no, this is how it's going to be done. It's all going to be digital. You're going to do the capture it, and you're going to edit it, and you're going to change the sound, and you're going to do visual effects, and you're going to distribute it digitally. And so working for him was amazing because you really saw the future, and you're actually a part of doing that future. And it was really a privilege to be able to work with him. And obviously, as the 8-year-old kid who saw Star Wars 17 times, it was
Yeah.
very personal for me to then be entrusted with helping to preserve his
Yeah.
legacy. When we were negotiating the deal with Disney of how we were going to preserve this
Yeah.
group of characters in this environment where you created this technology and these stories, and make sure that it was preserved for his children were basically sent off in the right
Right.
direction. It was really amazing for me.
Did any of it ruin it for you? Like seeing how it was actually made? Did the magic ever go away? We're like, oh, that's what it is. It's just
No, I've never
you know.
thought that. It's so funny. I've never
Yeah.
thought that. It
Yeah.
always amazed me that, like, the total company at Lucasfilm was about 2,200 people total. And 200 of those were at Lucasfilm. And that's where, we're kind of the people entrusted with making the Star Wars films. And of course, we'd hire lots of cast and crew, of course, so thousands of people. But it always amazed me that, these 200 people could ultimately touch hundreds of millions of people that way. I mean, that's the power of media, is
Yeah.
that you can make something, and you would viscerally, you'd see the people. So even today, I see it all the time. People just so touched by those stories.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see that. Now, filmmaking is hard, right? I mean, the thing that most surprised me and most people don't realize is just how hard it is to make a movie.
Yeah.
Like, making a great movie is really, really, really hard. And people don't appreciate it, right? They just think, oh, you get a camera, you start filming it and everything. It's
Yeah.
it's incredibly hard.
Well,
And
you
so I
see
think
it
I got more of appreciation for that.
you see it at the end of the movie where you're like, good Lord, like there's this thing's been scrolling people's names. There's
Thousands of people.
seven
Yeah.
accountants. We're still rolling. It's crazy. How
It
did
takes a lot of people to make a movie.
I know you weren't the filmmaker, but did you? My understanding is the original Star Wars was a lot of physical stuff. Like they really built
Oh
that
yeah.
model. Did you notice how anything changed as it became more digital over
Oh,
time?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, it's funny. Me and friends of mine, like I have some good friends from Industrial Light and Magic and things who went through these revolutions while I was there.
Yeah.
We went through the digital revolution. I mean, I was just talking about the projector digitally, but we were in the midst of the revolution at ILM where things were going from physical props, like making models of things, and we were making models in episode one, like incredible models that you
Yeah.
you just can't believe exist. And I have lots of stories about that. But I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But they made these incredible physical models because it wasn't possible to make everything digitally, and they had so many challenges just with the things they had to do digitally. And so, but it was right at that period where the ILM model shop was becoming, obsolete, and
Yeah.
all of the model makers were turning from making physical models to having to make these things in CG, in computer graphics. And that happened between episode one and episode two. Episode two was almost entirely digital. By episode three, we even captured the film, edited, did everything digitally. And that's really because George was pushing the state of the art repeatedly. He wanted it all done digitally so he could create anything that his mind could imagine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really amazing. And now right now with AI and generative AI and the ability to generate hyper realistic movies and hyper realistic images of humans and hyper realistic situations very, very, very easily. It's another revolution in filmmaking
Yeah.
where these new tools are enabling people to make things that never could have been made before.
Yeah.
Much easier, much quicker, much more cheaply. So, and I think it's a real another revolution, especially for the computer graphics industry.
The future is cool. So at some point this chapter comes to an end and it gets sold to Disney. Was that a kind of inevitable, obvious thing, or how did that come to pass?
I mean, at some level, it's inevitable and obvious. I mean, talk about any venture company, right? Any
Yeah.
company at some point, in almost every case, the founder, even if it's a single founder who still controls the company, as was the case with Lucasfilm, ultimately they get to the point where they want to, you know, liquidate it, like move away from the company and go on to the next phase of their life. I mean, at that
Yeah.
point, George had done, been at it for 40 solid years,
Yeah.
and he had just gotten married to Melody,
Yeah.
and they wanted to have a child, and which they did. And he was facing the prospect. We knew he had to make 7, 8, and 9. We knew he had to make these new films in order to
Right.
kind of keep. This was something that George always knew about Disney, was that
Yeah.
Walt Disney and the Disney Company were very good at keeping, you know, characters and stories alive for
Right.
generations of children, better than anyone else. There's really no other company or that ever has done it the way Disney has done it. And so George was like, I need to, I don't want to face the prospect of another 10 years of doing episode 7, 8, and 9.
Right.
It's exhausting, right? For
Right.
him,
Right.
every day was like a final exam. It was
Right.
incredible. Making films is difficult. It's not easy, even for George Lucas, even for
Right.
Steven Spielberg.
Right.
And he just was like, I'm not ready to do that. I don't want to do that. And so he went and had a conversation with Bob Iger, famously, and he came back to the top leadership team at Lucasfilm, very like three of us, and said, "Hey, I talked to Bob. I'm ready to sell to Disney. You guys go off and start negotiating this deal." So I went off and started doing that.
Wow. That's incredible. Well,
Yeah.
before we move on, I have to ask, do you have a preferred order for watching the 9 films for someone who's
You
never seen
know,
them?
I just did it with my young kids from a second marriage, 7 and 10, and we did it a couple of years ago. We watched the films and we did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We did
Oh,
it in the order that George wanted it in.
okay.
Um, I of course did it 4, 5, 6, 1, 2,
One, two,
3,
three.
7,
So,
8,
yeah.
9.
Right.
But I think watching it, 1 through 9 makes a lot of sense, and it worked really well with the kids, and they get the story, and it flows incredibly well. So
Yeah. All
I'm
right.
gonna I'm gonna advocate for 1 through 9. I know
Th-
the Star Wars fanboys will kill me for that.
Hey, that's a whole podcast episode's worth of value right there.
Oh,
So
no doubt. No
it's
doubt.
so at some point, okay. So you decided, all right, I've had enough with this imaginary space. Let's go to real space.
That's right. I
Uh,
always say I go from fictional space to real space.
like, I mean, it wasn't incredible. I don't know, is George Lucas writing this story for you? You end up at SpaceX. How the heck does that
Yeah,
happen?
so I for about 18 months I ran Lucasfilm under Disney as the COO. And which was incredible, right? I got to work with Kathy Kennedy, who's just an amazing producer, just really amazing. Got to work with Bob Iger,
Yeah.
Kevin Mayer, who I negotiated the deal with at Disney, Alan Horn and Alan Bergman at the studios. And it was amazing to be able to work with all those people. But it was also a little soul sucking, right? It was like I personally had to go into a screening room and fire 400 of the people at LucasArts when we shut it down after the acquisition because
Yeah.
this was made, we're better off licensing this stuff. And that was super painful. And Disney was, I can't blame them. All of the divisions of Disney were super excited to have Star Wars as their thing, their plaything, to be able to exploit and make them crazy, amazing content. I mean, I just literally, for the first time, I had not been to Star Wars Galaxy Edge at Disney World. I just went there this past weekend for the first time. And it's amazing what the Imagineers did with Star Wars. So
Yep.
I'm not surprised
Right.
what Disney wanted to do that. But for me personally, it was like, I was no longer doing it. I was no
Right.
longer in charge. I was no longer the guy making the deal. So it was time to leave. So I finally got back to what I thought I was going to do 3 years after I came to Lucasfilm in the first place in 1998. I thought I'd go back to Silicon Valley and start working with startups and do a startup, be at a startup, help create a startup. And I did that. And I actually ended up at a VR company called Jaunt, which was the hot VR company at the time. And it was super exciting. And I just loved it. But it was five of us. I went from the COO of Lucasfilm to being first an advisor and eventually chief business officer of this little startup with five employees. I was literally on a couch in a little office above the mattress store on University Ave in Palo Alto. And I was like, yes, I finally did it. And we were doing the VR stuff at the point was incredible. It was just before Oculus was purchased by Facebook, by Meta.
Right.
And it was like the time to be doing VR was amazing. And I'm still disappointed that VR hasn't caught on with consumers the way it really ought to. They certainly from an entertainment perspective, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
And in fact, I went back as a side story. I took John back to Disney and pitched them on the technology, showed it to Bob Iger, and in 30 seconds they decided to invest and they led our B round.
Yeah.
But I did that for a while, and then I took a break and for personal reasons, and decided, okay, what's next in my career? And I just thought, like, who would I want to work for? What's another visionary I'd want to work for? And I said, I'd really love to work for Elon Musk. I just really appreciated the vision he had for making life multiplanetary, the vision he had for Tesla, vision he had for a lot of the things that he does. I couldn't have envisioned Doge, of course, but that's a whole different story.
Right.
But I said to myself, look, what's next? I'd love to work for Elon Musk. And I got Elon's email address from actually the co-founder of Jaunt, the VR company. He had Elon's email address. Didn't know him. He'd met him once. So he said, look, I'll give you his email address, but you're on your own. So I wrote a cold email to Elon and said, hi, my name's David. I love you. I'm making the heart sign.
Yeah.
I love you. I love what you do. And here's what I've done. And I'd love to work together. And amazingly, Elon responded. And the next thing you know, I'm the general counsel of SpaceX. I mean, um, it literally was that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it didn't hurt in the end. This happened after a whole bunch of interviews, and I met Gwynne Shotwell and Brett Johnson, the CFO, and I met everybody, and everyone blessed me. And then I got in front of Elon. At that point, I said, "Okay, my reference is George Lucas." And yeah, Elon was all over that. That's I for sure how I got through that interview. I think was
Right.
he wanted to get to the interview, the discussion with George about everything. But I think he talked to George more than he talked to me during my interview. But
Right.
George was really funny. We talk about working for visionaries. I went to George. I sat down with him for breakfast in San Anselmo, was a town where we both lived, and we sat down for breakfast. And I said, look, George, I'm interviewing with Elon Musk. I'm thinking of going to SpaceX, and I would love if you would be so kind as to be a reference for me. And he said, oh, it's so exciting, and SpaceX and going to Mars, and I wish I was 17 again and I could do these things. It's incredible. Very excited. And then he turns to me, he said, but David, are you sure you want to go work for another nutcase? And I said, George, I don't call you a nutcase. I call you a visionary. He said, David, that's just code word for nutcase. So, but they're both, incredible visionaries. And I got the opportunity to go work for Elon, which was
Yeah.
also really unbelievable, really amazing.
And how is this company possible? I mean, it goes from, I mean, just how do you imagine that you can build a rocket, go to Mars, catch the rocket backwards on a couple
Amazing.
It,
chopstick.
like who man, you've shared it. The engineer describes what it's like catching it, like it's catching a lightsaber.
Yeah.
You like
Yeah. Bill Riley said that. Bill Riley is one of the smartest, loveliest guys, helps run the Starship program, has been designing it. He said that famously a few months ago. It's like trying to catch a lightsaber, falling through the air with a pair of chopsticks, right?
yeah, with your elbows.
I love that. I totally share that. I think Bill is the best.
It's like you don't want to
But
be too early and you don't want to be too late.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt, and be careful where it drops. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, look, Elon is pretty amazing. Obviously, I mean, it's the vision is to make life multiplanetary by colonizing Mars.
Yeah.
He says it to everyone. He says it. He's been saying it for 20 years plus. He said it to me during my interview. Like, I want to die on Mars, just not on impact.
Yeah.
And
Right.
what he means is like, and he said during the interview, he said, look, I want to retire in a self-sustaining colony on Mars by age 70 is what he said. And he said, the reason I want to make Starlink and the reason they brought me in primarily was to help launch Starlink, was to help, they didn't need help figuring out how to launch rockets, obviously, or even doing contracts for launching
Right.
rockets. They really needed my help thinking about Starlink primarily. And what he said was, look, I need you to go help build this Starlink thing and set it up so that we can have enough capital to go to Mars. And he said at the time, I was like, I think I need about $200 billion in capital, and then I can get to Mars.
Yeah.
And so, that's what we did. And he envisions these things, and he has these goals. He's not motivated by money. I mean,
Yeah.
people say this, but you see it. He's not.
Yeah.
He's motivated by these visions,
Yeah.
by these visions of wanting to achieve this. So with Tesla, it was how to make save the world from climate catastrophe. Get rid of climate change by getting rid of fossil fuels, getting rid of certainly fossil fuel based engines for cars and trucks. And that was his vision for Tesla, and his vision for SpaceX is to make life multiplanetary. His vision for SpaceX still is that. That's his goal.
Yeah.
That's his number one goal in life.
Yeah, that seems kind of. I know people criticize him and he's doing this and that and he's trying to make more money. It's like, on the one hand, what is more money than he has? Like,
No,
that's not
he
even a
doesn't care.
thing.
He's
got
not.
it.
The only reason he's doing it for the money is so that he can use the money to go to Mars. And he's been consistent about it. And he keeps
Right.
saying, he says it. He's probably said it the last week, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what he wants the money for, is to go to Mars.
Yeah.
That's what it's for. Even the Tesla money. Now he wants to make enough money at Tesla so he can have enough money to go to Mars.
Yeah,
So,
and you have to have a vision like that too. It seems to
oh yeah.
build something that incredible. You don't build those things. George Lucas wasn't like, oh, I could make money on toys if I
Oh,
could come up with a space story.
George had a vision,
Obviously.
a vision, and that's that's the passion of great entrepreneurs and great. They're not doing it to make money. They're doing it to
Yeah.
achieve this vision. There's not even a business plan for Mars, right? There's no grand secret plan of how they're going to make money by going to Mars. They're not going to have a real estate Century 21 on Mars to sell plots of land. They're not going to, there's no secret. One time someone asked me literally when I was at SpaceX, are there secret diamond mines on Mars? And that's where they're going. No, right? There's no money. There's no plan. There's no like secret strategic document about how we're going to make money going to Mars.
Yeah.
What he realized is, look, to get to Mars, he used first principles and he figured out, okay, I got to make reusable rockets. We could probably make some money if we make reusable rockets. Let's make those. Then you have reusable rockets. Okay, so what do we do with that? We can get to space really easily and we can launch things cheaply. We could launch a bunch of satellites. What could we do if we launch a bunch of satellites? Hey, we could deliver internet service. Let's make Starlink, and that'll make us a bunch of money because then we can get to Mars.
Right.
Right? That's the thinking, and that's how the business plan worked.
And so what is next? It's just with like autonomous cars and with like rockets being caught and going up and down to space every other day. You just always imagine that being 10 years in the future, 20 or some weird number in the future not being here. And it seems here with the rockets, what's next? Like, when do people get, like, what ship goes to, is there a colony ship or a space yacht involved here?
This is what I love. So
I'd
what I
like
love,
one of those.
yes, there is a colony ship. It's called Starship. It is sitting on the launch pad down in Boca Chica, Texas. It has launched now, 8 times. They're still working through some of the bugs, obviously. They got to make sure it can launch and stay in orbit and not blow up. And that's a big thing, but that's how SpaceX does things. But that thing has successfully reached orbit. It has successfully gone around the Earth and softly touched down in a test landing, on the other side of the Earth.
Yeah.
That is a Mars colony ship. Starship is designed to carry 100 colonists on the 6-month journey to Mars. And Elon is building, the SpaceX is building, that wants to build hundreds of these and ultimately thousands of these down in Boca Chica, Texas, to send 1,000 of them at a time to Mars every 2 years. That is the plan, and that's what's happening. This thing is flying. This is not the future, right? This is like right now.
Yeah.
I've seen it twice. I saw the IFT-5 when it launched and they did the catch of the booster. I was there. It was unbelievable. And it's what people don't realize. And that's what I tell people from the venture perspective, right? It's like, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
And the time at which you can make, Elon was telling me all the time when I was at SpaceX, one of the things he tasked me with was helping to figure out how to get methane super cheap and super easily. And like, he had me studying oil and gas law and how do we drill for methane in Boca Chica and drill offshores from these big oil rigs and be able to fuel Starship directly, which is, how do I make the marginal cost of launch as cheap as possible? And what he says, and you've heard him say it before, he says it repeatedly, he said it to me, was if I can get fully reusable rockets, I can reduce the cost to launch up to 250 metric tons to low Earth orbit, and I can do it for the cost of a tank of methane and liquid oxygen, which if he fully vertically integrates, he thought he could get down to ultimately about $1 million.
Wow.
That is mind-blowing. Like if you could launch 250 metric tons for $1 million to low Earth orbit, and that's, by the way, that's easily within reach.
Yeah.
Right? We can argue, it's going to be 2 million, it's going to be 3 million, whatever. We're talking about another couple of orders of magnitude of reduction of the cost to get to low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
He then knows he can get to Mars. And that's why you keep hearing him talking about it all the time now with Trump, and Trump's talking about it, Elon's talking about it. He knows they've now solved it. They've gotten to the point where it's with some changes, changing software, changing some hardware, they have the ship ready to get to Mars.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's going to also make access to space generally. The fringe benefit for everybody else is now you can get to space easily.
Yeah.
You can now do anything in space. You can go to the moon. You can do stuff in low Earth orbit. You can go explore the solar system, ultimately explore the galaxy, because now you can get off of the confines of Earth very inexpensively. Ultimately, for the cost of what it's like, it is the cost of FedEx a kilogram from Los Angeles to New York. It'll be the same price to get a kilogram of payload from Earth to low Earth orbit. And once you're in low Earth orbit, you can do anything.
I mean, viewed that way, the whole thing with him and Donald Trump and Doge, it just seems like it's another hack for him.
There's no doubt.
To get his damn thing to Mars. He's like, well, if I don't get the
make it faster. And what he saw was, absolutely, look, I don't have any special inside knowledge into it, but you could just see he operates the same way every time, and he says it. He says it out publicly, and people just don't believe him. They think Walter Isaacson recently was in an interview, I think it was last year, and he was saying, Elon, he would say these things like about going to Mars and these big visions and everything. And I kept thinking, he's just posturing for his employees and he's just saying it to get them motivated. And then I heard it again and again. Once I heard it 20 times, I finally realized, wow, he's serious about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I saw the same thing. Like he just repeats these things again and again and again, and he says it out loud. He's saying to everyone what he's planning to do. So with respect to Doge, it was, and certainly the support of Trump, it's like, I realized, look, Biden and Harris weren't going to support me. They clearly hadn't. They wanted to, all I was getting regulatory hassles, and they were using it for political purposes because they for whatever reason, they hated me.
Yeah.
And so I realized if I go with Trump, he was very clear. If I spend a couple $100 million supporting this guy, he's going to make it much easier for me to get to Mars.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, the president of the United States, in his inaugural address, talks about going to Mars.
Yeah.
Is just repeated it again last week. That's just he fully achieved his goal, and all he had to do was spend a couple $100 million.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so you survive working for him cannot be an easy thing. I think in the time you were there for however amount of time, I think Tesla went through 4 general counsels.
4 general counsels while I was at SpaceX. Yeah, there's no doubt. I had started right when I started. He had just fired the general counsel of Tesla after 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. And
then proceeded to fire, like while I was there. I was interviewing GCs at Tesla like all the time because he kept firing the GCs of Tesla while I was there. Right. He's tough on lawyers. I will say that he's tough on lawyers. And I was one. I had to send. I reported to Elon and Gwynn. I had to send Elon my weekly update every week with at least 5 points of what I achieved last week. And oh
And
man,
Glenn, the president, who's the president of SpaceX? Everyone forgets that
Glenn
there's
Shotwell. Glenn Shotwell is the longtime president, one of the first 10 employees at SpaceX, still there. Incredible,
right.
incredible leader.
Because when NASA talks about SpaceX and they want to avoid Elon, they talk about how great she is.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of
Well, she
incredible.
has fabulous relationships with NASA. You know, she has fabulous relationships with the Department of Defense and the intelligence communities. She's been in the space business for long before she came to SpaceX and has really built it up and has incredible credibility and has the complete trust of Elon, right?
Yeah,
That's
there you
so
go.
she's super credible
Yeah,
and manages that stuff unbelievably well, and also knows how not to get in Elon's way, right? Like,
right,
don't get between him and Mars. Like that,
right.
he's smart. Make sure you enable him. It's the same thing that I, did at Lucasfilm, which is like, make sure George can create whatever films and television and digital and technology, whatever he wants to do. Our job is to make sure he can do that.
Yeah,
And that's what Wynn's job is at SpaceX, right? And she's built an incredible business doing just that.
yeah. So it's not enough of a career yet. You move on again. What is? Tell me, Red Rock Media. I
Yeah.
think this
So,
is
well, I had to
fantastic.
finally merge the streams, right?
Yeah,
Right. I was like straight out of
right,
Ghostbusters.
right,
Um, you know, when I left SpaceX, I knew at that point, first of all, I knew where launch costs were going, and I knew that you could build these constellations of satellites incredibly inexpensively, and you could do just about anything in space, the things I'm talking about. So I said, I want to start a venture fund because people are going to take advantage of this.
yeah,
And so I met up with a couple of partners and we put together a fund and launched that fund. And now we're launching our second fund. We're targeting 75 to $100 million. We already did our first close. It's going really well.
great.
So, but I never lost that itch of the space media stuff. And while I was at SpaceX, I got there and again, when I first got there, I thought to myself, okay, I'm never doing another producer deal or agent. I don't have to deal with agents. I don't have to deal with distribution deals. Never gonna have to deal with any of that stuff again. And literally 2 weeks later, a guy named PJ Van Sandwick comes in with Tom Cruise and Doug Liman, and they want a flight to space so they can make a space movie on the ISS. Like 2 weeks after I got to SpaceX.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy, right? I try to get out, they keep pulling me back in. And I realized very quickly, and that the media opportunities in space are just massive, right? People love space content. Science fiction is almost always the most profitable films that are made because people love space. They love science fiction.
Yep.
And also realize, look, this opportunity to go to Mars is going to be massive, right? And I went to Elon and I said, look, when we land the first human on Mars, that will be the biggest media event in human history.
Yep.
When the Apollo astronauts landed, when Neil Armstrong took the first step on the moon, at that point, it was a 93% Nielsen share, which means that 93% of the televisions in the world were tuned in to watch him do that live.
Right.
If 93% of the people, the 8 billion people on the planet, watch, the first human take a step on Mars, probably going to be a woman, is my guess, but whoever it is, everyone's going to watch that. It's going to be the
Yep.
biggest media event in human history. And so Elon agreed. He's like, yo, that's huge. I said, we should take advantage of that opportunity. That's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity all by itself. And he put me in touch with Ari Emanuel at WME, obviously a very, very famous talent agent.
Yep.
And we with at WME and a lot of people there, and also even we're working with CAA as well, another big agency. We just worked out, the opportunity. And I worked on it while I was there. And when I left, Elon there's not like marketing and media people. There's not
Right.
filmmakers. There's barely anybody at SpaceX or at Tesla that does those things. He doesn't believe in advertising. He doesn't believe in doing those things. And so when I left, it kind of died. But I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I ran into a guy I worked with for a long time at Lucasfilm who ran distribution. And we started talking about it. I said, you know what, we should just start a company to do this. And start not only try to document the human mission to Mars, but just make content about humanity's expansion in the cosmos. And that's what became Red Rock Media. So Red Rock referring to Red Rock as in Mars.
Right.
And we formed that and raised some money for it and have been working on content. We've been in discussions with SpaceX for a long time about a lot of different content. We've filmed a short film about the Starship launch. This is available on our website about one of the Starship launches from the perspective of a welder. We're working on a TV show right now we're calling Go for Launch, which is kind of like, think about like Imagine like F1 Drive to Survive, but with space companies. All these space companies that I deal with, space startups that I deal
Yeah.
with all the time. They're really interesting characters, right? There's
Right.
lots of Elons and people who are visionary and, lots of people working in the trenches and people who have become passionate about space. You see that in this little movie we made about this welder. Didn't know anything about space, has now become passionate about making life multiplanetary. And there's all these kinds of stories. So that's the stories you want to tell.
Yeah.
And Go for Launch is about these companies all competing with each other and cooperating with each other and working with each other and against each other, constantly fighting with each other and trying to achieve these incredible things in space. And so
Yeah.
we've started production on that as our first show.
So does someone have the rights to the 100 people on the Starship, like filming that?
SpaceX does.
Oh wow, that's gonna be a show.
Yeah, right. No doubt.
like
That's what I'm excited about.
like Real Housewives in space. Like that's gonna be
Yeah, it's like I sometimes joke. It's like Big Brother. It's going to be covered with cameras. Right? There's
yeah,
going to be cameras
Big
everywhere in the
Brother.
ship, of course. It's going to be like Big Brother meets Survivor. Hopefully meets Love Island, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
going to be
of course it
right.
will.
Love and trauma in space because the journey, like you're going to have incredible things happening. You're going to have the launch, right? Amazing. Everyone's going to watch that. Then you have this 6 month, well, and you have the buildup, right? You have who's going to get selected, who's going to go, and why are
Mhm.
they going to go, and why would they want to be there? And then they launch, and then you have a 6 month journey to Mars, right?
Right.
So you're going to really get to know these people, right?
Yeah.
You can have live broadcasts every day, but it's got to be great, right? It can't just be turn on the camera and see what they're doing and
Right.
watch me float around in space. It's got to be like you got to have someone who helps create a story,
Yeah.
among it. I'm not saying artificially create a story. I'm saying the best non-scripted television has a story, has a plot that they pull out of the things that are really happening.
Oh.
And so you make that kind of a story of that 6 month journey. And then you're really going to care, do they live or die when they land?
Yeah.
Right? Is the landing going to be successful? That's why everyone's going to watch it.
Yeah.
It's going to be successful, and then even better, they're going to live on Mars,
Yeah.
right? And you have endless stories to tell about what life on Mars is going to be like, right? And that's why I'm so excited about Red Rock Media. I mean,
Yeah.
our goal is to make it like the discovery media for humanity's expansion in the cosmos.
Yeah.
That's our goal. And so it's not as big as, Elon's goal, but it's a pretty big goal. And I think we can do it because it's adventure is kind of dead on Earth. If
Yeah.
you could pay someone $15,000 to take you to the top of Mount Everest, and you can take a beautiful cruise on a four-season ship to the edge of the Antarctic shelf, and they'll literally, I have pictures of this. They'll put a table with a white tablecloth down next to the penguins, right where Shackleton died,
Right.
and they'll put champagne on your table and caviar, and you can have brunch on the Antarctic ice shelf. Like there's no adventure left. There's a few things, and you can do some base jumping and try to get into a submersible to go down to see the Titanic if you want to.
Bad idea.
But it's there's no adventure left on Earth, and that's why I think one of the biggest things about going to Mars is it's going to be the biggest adventure in human history. People will die, and it'll be like going to the Wild West. It'll be like just like people who went on the wagon trains or people who got on the Mayflower and came to the Americas, and they're probably going to die,
Right.
but it's a grand adventure, and you read a lot of stories about it. It's going to be people want to hear those stories, and people want to participate in those stories.
Yeah.
They want to do it, and that's what I think is so exciting and something I want to make content about.
Man, I can't wait for the future. So we come at long last. You're now a venture capitalist investing in
These space companies that
this
are
thing has opened up now,
making the future. That's right.
and you have these points in history where the internet comes and a bunch of companies emerge, and the mobile comes and a bunch of companies emerge, and now I guess access to space comes and a bunch of companies emerge. And is this what you're investing in?
100%. So I started as a lawyer 1993, 1994 in Silicon Valley, right? Just as the internet was starting. I got my first email address right then, and all these companies. I remember going to the partner at the law firm who was the former general counsel of Intel and is a partner at my law firm. And I went to him and I said, I really want to try to get some IPO shares of this company called Netscape. It's doing this incredible stuff, and you'll be able to browse the internet. It's going to be amazing. And this guy, Mark Andreessen, he knows what he's doing. And what are you talking about? That's not a real business. It's going to go away, blah, blah, blah. And then there's these company like Cisco, right? Like making these routers that are connect people in space. Now these pipes exist. Now we have to connect people with these boxes that are connect people. And then, there's these crazy guys who are saying, I'm going to sell books on the internet, right? It's going to be great. And you're going to start, ultimately, you'll buy everything on the internet. Okay, we'll forget that wacko, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it was like in the mid 90s, going into the late 90s. And then obviously we know what's happened. Most of the Fortune 50 are these internet companies. Now you have the same thing happening with space. The pipes are there. The reusable rockets are the pipes.
Yep.
And the access to space is there and it's cheap. Okay, done. That's today. Now you're seeing all these companies that are going to be the Ciscos and the Amazons and the companies like Netscape, and ultimately, browsers, the huge browser wars. That's happening right now.
Yep.
And you can invest in those companies because they exist. They're being formed right now. And if you put money in them, not all of them are going to succeed. There's plenty of examples of internet companies that succeed, but some of them are going to be the next SpaceX. The most valuable private company in the world today, SpaceX, is a space company that nobody thought was going to be successful and doesn't have a business plan for their mission, right?
Yep.
There's going to be a lot more like that. And so now is the time to invest in those. And that's why I got into making a venture fund to invest in those companies. And it's super exciting, right? What could be more exciting? You want to invest in, SaaS middleware or for, financial transactions or whatever the hell it is? Or do you want to invest in a company that's making cool rocket thrusters, and go, one of the some months ago, I went and drove a moon rover in a parking lot. And this company's actually going to bring that rover. It's called Astrolab, is bringing that rover to the moon the next year.
Wow.
And, I work with Firefly. Like Firefly just landed its own lander on the moon. They just last night, took the first picture of a eclipse of the Earth, of the sun by the Earth from a moon rover. And they just posted it. It's an amazing photo.
That's incredible.
We actually helped them. We actually went out there last March. Me and a film producer friend helped them kind of figure out, where do you want to put the cameras and what angles do you want on your rover, on the lander, so that you get great shots. And, they took the advice and they got some incredible shots. They've been publishing them the last few weeks. And, it's amazing you get to do this stuff, that you get to, invest and help these entrepreneurs that are going to change the course of humanity. That's if you can't get excited about that, what are you going to get excited about? So that's why we do the venture fund.
It's funny.
It's been very successful.
Venture capitalists say they try to be helpful. It's kind of a cliche.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've heard I bring Lucasfilm sort of advice to how to take a picture of Earth from the moon.
Yeah.
As being a value add.
Yeah. Well, like I have to, look, I bring the value. It's, for what it is. I've had some experiences that are helpful, certainly, to, big visionaries who want to do things. But, and I certainly saw how things are done at SpaceX and learned a lot in a very short time there. But, I bring the SpaceX mafia to the table, which is helpful as well, right? Like this company's worth $350 billion. There's a lot of engineers there who are now have enough money to go take the risk of starting their own companies. And there's a lot of them doing it. We invested in one company called Argo. 3 brothers from SpaceX, the Carlyle brothers, who all left SpaceX at the same time. They grew up together in Houston, dreaming of running their own space company. They ended up as engineers and at SpaceX. One ran government sales, one ran launch operations, one was working on reusability of the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. And they left at the same time and started a company. They want to be the ice truckers of space. They want to be the guys, remember, from the Expanse that transport the ice around the galaxy, around the solar system? Yeah. They want to be those guys who collect the ice and then transport it around the world. And they're started by making these incredible water-based thrusters, 2 types of water-based thrusters, and they're building in an orbital transfer vehicle, basically a space tug that can move things around in space at high delta V, it's called, very hot, very quickly. And, that's a great example of the SpaceX mafia. And it's just no different than the PayPal mafia, which Elon was part of and, Peter Thiel was part of. All of these guys are, Reid Hoffman, all of these guys left after the great success of PayPal and started these incredible other companies. And that is absolutely happening right now in the space business. And then my partner, Celeste Ford, she's kind of a legend in the aerospace business. She won't tell you because she has to kill you, but it's out there on the internet that she actually helped run the military space shuttle program in the 80s and 90s. And then when she left the military, started a 300-person aerospace engineering firm called Stellar Solutions. And, that's our secret sauce. Like we have
Yeah.
access to unbelievable technical diligence, unbelievable access to markets, market information, unbelievable access to the people who are spending the money in the government in particular, but also the big primes on space programs. And we bring that to our entrepreneurs. So it's proved to be a very great combination. Our first fund was 25 million. It's up. Its TVPI is now 1.49, which is great. No J curve. I don't even know what a J curve is, but we don't have one.
Right.
And now that we're raising our second fund, hope it to be $100 million.
Yeah. You're also not supposed to know what a military space shuttle is, as I understand
Yeah, exactly. That's what
it.
Celeste gets upset. She keeps telling me she's going to have to kill me, but I keep telling it's on the internet. I
Yeah.
said, Celeste, it's on the internet, and she's like, no, I can't confirm or deny that that's what I did or did not do.
So the space lady's name is Celeste. Is that real?
Celeste Ford, yeah,
Uh,
appropriately enough. She insisted we're separate from Stellar Solutions, but she insisted on sticking. She loves the name Stellar. She uses it in conversation all the time. So she said we have to call this Stellar Ventures because that's good luck for me. And I said
yeah.
we were fine. Me and my other partner Matt, who's the finance guy, he was like, we're like, okay, fine, let's do it.
It is so fortuitous that her name is that her name is
Celeste, totally.
Celeste. That's fabulous. I'm on season 2 of The Expanse. Should I keep going?
Oh my God,
I
yeah,
won't
the
be
expanse
disappointed.
gets better and better and better. Less zombies, and more, sort of the drama of like
The politics.
politics and the drama of space, but done really, really well. I think the Expanse is fantastic. It's maybe one of those rare examples where the show is even slightly better than the books. The books are great. I've read all the books,
Yeah.
but the show is really fantastic, and absolutely you should keep watching it.
I'll wrap up on this. This is just something I'm personally curious about. Do you know about like the Drake equation, like what that thing
Sure.
is?
Yeah, yeah,
So
great folk.
as I understand the Drake equation, people are like, well, if there's alien life, like why hasn't it in time? Why haven't they shown up here?
Yep, it's the Fermi paradox.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Drake equation is this long equation. It's like, well, what's the probability that there's a planet that works, and then that someone could live on the planet, and that they
Yep.
can build, or they don't kill them. I don't know, something like that.
Well,
What
it
is
just
your,
adds up the number of. It's really just a equation that was created that said, okay, if we assume there's X number of stars and X number of planets and X number of habitable planets, and that life was created in X percentage of those, it was all tiny fractions. And think about this: they were doing this. They did this on the time in the 30s and 40s where they didn't even know that there were so many planets. Now we know there's planets everywhere because
right?
we found them, thousands and thousands of everywhere we look. We see planets. So and then the Fermi paradox, Enrico Fermi famously asked at a lunch, I don't know if it was at the Manhattan Project or something in the 40s, 50s, asked at a lunch, in Los Alamos or something, where he said, okay, well, if it's so obvious that there's aliens, where are they?
Yeah,
Why are they not here? And then a lot of things have come up, theories have come up about that, which I kind of subscribe to, which is that, well, the time scale is so long, right? It's billions and billions and billions of years, to use, to quote Carl Sagan, billions and billions.
yeah,
Such a long time scale. Humans have only been around for a few 100,000 years, and we've only been writing for 5,000, and we've only been going to space for 75.
right.
Not even. And so think about that time scale of humanity. 75 years, 100 years, even if you say 1,000 years, it's such a tiny fraction of the scale of the universe that it's very unlikely we actually overlap with any of these other intelligent species, even if it's 100% guaranteed obvious that there are other intelligent beings probably in our galaxy, much less in the universe. And so that's the big question, right? And I was literally, me and some friends were talking about this at dinner. Max Haud is a good friend. He's the CEO of VAST, which is trying to build a space station, the first commercial space station, and they're doing a great job. And he's a good friend. And we were literally last night at dinner with our kids and our wives talking about this exact issue. And, I think, one possibility is that time horizon is too long. Another possibility is that, people destroy themselves. Civilizations destroy
Yeah,
themselves. It's called the Great Wall, right? Right. The Great Filter.
yeah,
That
filter, right.
that civilizations end up destroying themselves through nuclear war, or pandemics or what have you. And again, I think that's possible. But I think one of the programs I'm on the board of a group called the Galileo Project out of Harvard. It's run by a guy named Avi Loeb. He's He's the head of the astronomy
I,
department.
I've had him on the podcast.
Oh, there you go. He's great.
He came on to talk. He talked about a Oumuamua, that thing.
Well, there you go. So his hypothesis, and I believe it. I sit in on our general meetings every month. His hypothesis is that the best way to look for intelligent life in the universe is by looking for their artifacts, in the same way that we look for artifacts of ancient civilizations on Earth. People ask, well, why aren't we seeing them? Well, we can barely. I mean, we didn't even find the Mayan temples on these whole 1,000 years after they'd been lost in the jungles. Like we can't even find it on Earth. How do you think we're going to find it in space? But we can look for their technological detritus, as it were, like
space junk.
The space junk, like the Voyager craft. It's just like that Star Trek movie where Voyager goes off and gets captured by the aliens, and they return it, they bring it back, and that's the whole plot. That's exactly the story, right? It's exactly the thing.
Yeah. Should we be broadcasting into space?
Well, we are. It doesn't matter, right? You watch Contact, right? I mean, the Nazis are here, right? That's the first broadcast, and that's what the aliens caught. We heard you, right? We're doing it. So we are broadcasting space. I don't think it matters whether we're specifically pointing it in a particular direction or not. I'm not sure about that. But we're announcing our presence to the universe. It's probable that whoever's listening is dead.
Right.
Or they're AIs, and then they're going to come and, they'll come take over or whatever.
Or they don't care.
Or they don't care, right? We're like
so
ants in an anthill in the desert, right? They don't care. But so I don't think that's an issue, but I think we should be looking. I mean, it is the fundamental question of humanity. Peter Beck just posted there was an article posted about Peter Beck, an interview. I read it this morning. And Peter Beck was talking about that. They're sending a probe both to Mars, but they're also sending one to Venus to look for signs of life on Venus. I think one of my hypotheses, and I said, I'll leave you with this. I think when we go to Mars, there's a decent chance that what we find there is basically DNA. Not human DNA, but, the earliest forms of DNA, bacterial DNA. And that what that will prove to us is a couple of things, right? Either life is ubiquitous, right? It grows. It's easy for it. The lightning in a bottle can happen if it happens on 2 planets in one solar system. And if we find it on Venus, even more so, 3 planets in our solar system, all 3 have evidence of life. That means that life is ubiquitous in the universe, okay? Or it means that it got transferred from one planet to another. Maybe a meteor hit it and a rock came up and it had DNA on it and boom, it went to the other planet. Still don't know where it came from ultimately, but who knows? But the third option is that someone seeded it. The panspermia theory is that some intelligent life sent out automated self-replicating probes that contain DNA and intentionally were Johnny Appleseed for the whole galaxy. Yeah. And now on the planets that could support life bloomed. All 3 are super interesting. And I would love to explore that further.
The future is cool. Thanks so much. Thank you for doing this. How do people find you, your firm?
Easy. I'm easy to find. Just Google David Anderman. You'll find me. It's pretty easy. There's a couple others, but not many. David Anderman, Lucasfilm, David Anderman, Stellar Ventures. You can see our website, svc.vc. You can find redrockmediagroup.net. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find.
All right. Thanks so much for doing this. This has been
so
Something
much,
Venture.
It's awesome. I really enjoyed talking about it.
This is cool. This has been the Something Venture podcast. David Anderman, my guest. Talk to you next time.